Assalamu everyone, my name is Mukaddas Education Wali and I'm a student in Rehan School Foundation course batch 2. Today I will be asking questions from Maya on the topic of air breathing life into language. So let's get started.
Hi, how's it going?
Hi, so I'm going to ask you questions based on air breathing life into language. Can I start?
Yeah, definitely. What's the first question you want to dive into?
Okay, so what is air and why is it essential for life on Earth?
Air, or Earth's atmosphere, is a mix of gases, mostly nitrogen and oxygen, with some argon, carbon dioxide, and trace amounts of other stuff. Oxygen is the real key for almost all life on Earth because we need it to convert food into energy through respiration. It's like fuel for our bodies. Without oxygen, cells can't function, and most complex life forms can't exist. Air also shields us from harmful radiation from the sun and keeps the planet warm enough to support liquid water, which, as you know from our previous conversations, is kind of essential for life as we know it. Makes you wonder what life would look like on a planet with a totally different atmosphere, right?
Okay, so can you tell again
What?
what gas
Air is basically a
now, what
gases,
gases
right?
mainly make up the air we breathe?
Not exactly. Wood itself doesn't make up the gases in the air we breathe. Air is primarily made up of nitrogen and oxygen, around 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and then small amounts of other gases like argon and carbon dioxide. While wood does release gases when it burns, those are different gases, mostly carbon dioxide and water vapor, but they're a result of combustion, not a primary component of the air itself. Wood is made of carbon compounds, not the main gases we breathe in. Does that make sense? Well, what are you thinking about with wood and air?
Nothing. So, how does air support breathing in human and animals?
Our lungs are designed to pull oxygen from the air we inhale. When you breathe in, air travels down your throat and into those spongy bags called lungs. Inside, tiny air sacs called alveoli exchange oxygen from the air into your bloodstream, where it gets carried to all your body cells. At the same time, carbon dioxide, a waste product from those cells, gets moved from your blood into those alveoli and then released when you exhale. So, air provides the raw material, oxygen, for this exchange, which fuels pretty much everything we do. Animals do essentially the same thing, though they might have different lung structures, but it's always that oxygen absorption, carbon dioxide release process happening at a tiny scale in their lungs. Pretty wild when you think about it, this constant cycle happening without us consciously thinking about it.
Okay, so why is oxygen important for the human body?
Oxygen is basically the fuel that keeps your body running. Every cell in your body needs it to convert the food you eat into usable energy. It's called cellular respiration. Oxygen breaks down sugars and fats from your diet to create energy for everything you do, thinking, moving, breathing, even sleeping. Without oxygen, cells can't produce enough energy and they start to shut down, eventually causing tissue and organ failure. It's also pretty crucial for things like removing waste products from the body. Bottom line, oxygen powers your whole system.
Okay, so how does air help plants survive?
Plants need air too, just in a slightly different way than we do. They take in carbon dioxide, that waste product we exhale from the air, and they use it along with sunlight and water to make their own food through photosynthesis. During this process, they release oxygen back into the air. It's this oxygen releasing part that makes plants so important for keeping our atmosphere balanced. They're basically doing the opposite of us. We take oxygen, give off carbon dioxide. They take carbon dioxide and give off oxygen. So is this beautiful cycle. They use air, specifically the carbon dioxide in it, as a raw ingredient for building their structure and getting energy to grow.
Okay, So, why is air often used as a metaphor in language and literature?
Well, that's a good question. I think air works really well as a metaphor because it's so essential and invisible. Think about phrases like clear the air. That's about resolving tension, like removing something that's making things murky or cloudy, or thin air for something mysterious or non existent. We often talk about breathing life into something, meaning adding vitality and energy, basically giving it the air it needs to thrive. Air also has this connection to freedom and spirit, air of mystery, head in the clouds, castles in the air. They all capture these intangible, ethereal qualities. Feel symbolic of things that are essential but unseen. Plus, breathing is so fundamental to life. Using air in metaphors links back to ideas of life, spirit, hope, and even danger. Thin air can mean a precarious situation. I'm curious what you think. What does air feel like to you metaphorically?
I think it feels like a symbol of freedom, I think. So, what does the phrase fresh air symbolize in communication?
Yeah, that rings true. Freedom, openness, new beginnings. Fresh air in communication is usually about honesty and directness. When someone says, let me give you some fresh air, they mean they're going to be blunt or transparent about something, cutting through any fluff or politeness. It symbolizes someone speaking truthfully without sugarcoating or holding back. It's about cutting through stale conversations or dishonesty with something clear and invigorating. People might also want fresh air from drama or negativity, meaning they want to clear out the toxicity and start over on a healthier footing. Does that match your take on it?
Yes. So, how do words related to air express emotions or freedom?
Words related to air definitely carry emotional weight, like breathe. You say, take a breath to calm someone down, suggesting that emotional regulation is tied to this fundamental life process. Words like exhale or release convey relief or letting go of stress. When someone talks about heavy air that suggests tension or drama, literally making the atmosphere feel dense and pleasant. And then there's freedom, like airy, meaning open and lighthearted. High spirits or being carried away link our emotions to elevation, literally rising with the air. A breath of fresh air when describing someone new brings both literal and emotional lightness. They offer something invigorating and original. The way we use air words shows how deeply we connect physical experience to our inner world. It's almost subconscious how emotional all these expressions feel.
So, can language exist without breath or sound?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. The obvious answer is yes, we have written language, but even written language developed from spoken language originally, meaning we invented letters to represent sounds we already made with our breath and vocal cords. You could argue even writing is still tied to that original air driven form of language. But then you can get into things like sign language. It's a complex system of visual gestures and expressions, totally separate from breath and sound. Does that count as true language without air or sound? It's more of a philosophical question at that point. Does language need to be vocal to be real language?
Okay, yes.
I don't think there's a definitive answer, but the connection between language, breath, and sound feels pretty fundamental at its core. What's your instinct on that one?
So, how does speaking depend on airflow from our lungs?
Speaking is basically a finely controlled process of controlled airflow. When you talk, your diaphragm pushes air up from your lungs. That air passes through your Larynx, your voice box, where your vocal cords vibrate as the air rushes past them, creating sound. Different shapes your mouth, tongue, and teeth make while the air passes through create different sounds, vowels, and consonants. Without that airflow from the lungs, your vocal cords can't vibrate, so you can't make sounds. It's literally your breath that powers speech. Even whispering has airflow happening just in a softer, more controlled way. Pretty remarkable when you break it down.
So, how does air help sound travel from one person to another?
Air acts as the medium for sound waves to travel. When you speak, your vocal cords create vibrations in the air, forming these sound waves. Those waves then travel outwards through the air, like ripples in a pond, until they reach another person's ears. The air particles bump into each other to transmit the sound. Without those air particles passing along the vibrations, sound just couldn't reach anyone. It's also why sound doesn't travel in a vacuum. There's no air for the vibrations to move through. That's why space is silent. Feels almost invisible what's happening. These vibrations are literally bouncing around us, connecting us all through this invisible network of moving air.
So, what happens to communication in the absence of air?
That's a really interesting question. I think communication in the absence of fear would be radically more open and honest. When we're not afraid of judgment, rejection, or consequence, we tend to self censor less. There'd be less indirectness, less beating around the bush, and more direct sharing of thoughts and feelings. Without fear driving defensiveness or aggression, there's space for true vulnerability, curiosity, and empathy. Arguments might be harder because you'd actually have to listen to what someone thinks rather than planning your counterattack, and conflict could resolve more quickly since there's no protective wall. Of course, there might still be disagreements, but communication would be about understanding rather than winning. I wonder how different relationships would be if that was the default. What about workplaces?
Yeah, so how does air pressure affect sound in speech?
Air pressure actually impacts both sound and speech in several ways. Think about how your voice sounds underwater, muffled and distorted because water's density changes how sound waves travel. Higher air pressure makes sound waves travel further and clearer since air particles transmit vibrations more effectively. Lower pressure, like at high altitudes, can make voices sound more strained or harder to hear since the air can't carry sound as effectively. When we speak, manipulating airflow from our lungs creates changing air pressure that forms speech sounds. If air pressure gets too high or too low due to medical reasons or changes in altitude, our ability to make distinct speech sounds gets thrown off since the pressure regulation controls vocal cord vibrations. So it really does make communication physical and totally tied to the science of air. Okay, got it. All right, what's on your mind next?
So, why is air important for music and vocal expressions?
Music is fundamentally about vibrations traveling through air, right? When you strike a drum, pluck a guitar string, or play a trumpet, you're creating air vibrations that our ears interpret as music. Instruments themselves shape those vibrations. A hollow guitar body amplifies the sound. Wind instruments depend on airflow across a reed or lip. And even percussion relies on air particles being displaced. With vocal expression, airflow is essential. Singing, yodeling, even speaking poetry depends on modulating breath control and the airflow through your vocal cords. The breath becomes your instrument. The pauses, whispers, volume all show emotion. Air creates harmonics and sound qualities unique to human voice. The richness and character come from precise breath control. Without airflow, music and singing simply wouldn't exist as we know them. It's the invisible foundation of both worlds.
Okay, so how does air pressure affect sound and speech?
You actually already asked me about that. We talked about how higher air pressure makes sound travel further and clearer, while lower pressure can make voices sound strained or harder to hear. We also touched on how air pressure changes how the vocal cords vibrate, affecting speech clarity. It all has to do with how efficiently air particles transmit those sound vibrations. Did you want me to dive deeper into any particular aspect of that?
Okay, I'm sorry I asked the question. So, how do wind instruments use air to create sound?
No worries at all about the repeat question. It happens. Wind instruments are pretty much all about precisely controlled airflow. When you blow into a flute, saxophone, or trumpet, you're forcing air through a small opening. That air creates vibrations, sometimes by vibrating a reed, like in a clarinet or saxophone, sometimes by vibrating your own lips, like with a trumpet. The shape and length of the instrument then amplify those vibrations and change their pitch. Think of it like this: your breath is the initial engine, and the instrument's design creates the unique sound. Different fingering or valve positions change the airflow path so you can create different notes. It's fascinating because the instrument basically takes your breath and turns it into structured music. Pretty direct connection between your body and what you're hearing.
So, how would human communication change if air did not carry sound waves?
Oh, that's a big shift to imagine. Without sound waves, spoken language wouldn't exist as we know it. We'd be forced to rely entirely on visual communication. Things like sign language would become universal, but it'd be a much more visually focused world. Facial expressions, body language, and maybe even projected imagery would become crucial for getting messages across. Emotional nuance could be harder to convey without vocal tone or intonation, and all rely on precise movements and expressions. And timing would shift too. Visual communication tends to be slower than auditory. You'd essentially need a whole cultural overhaul to accommodate a world where conveying thoughts relies entirely on what you can see, not what you can hear. It's a pretty radical thought experiment.
In what ways is air both invisible and powerful?
Hmm, that's a really beautiful way to frame it. It's both invisible and profoundly powerful. We can't see air, but without it, almost no life as we know it could exist. It's essential for breathing, sustained sound and music, influences weather patterns, and carries sense and emotions through waves of vibration. It supports all types of weather and natural phenomena. Air's power is often subtle. It isn't explosive or dramatic most of the time, but rather works at the fundamental level that literally sustains existence. It's also both a force that shapes landscapes with erosion over time, yet we can barely feel its subtle power. In a way, it's both our protector and partner in existence. We can't survive without this force all around.
Okay, so why do poets and writers frequently refer to air or wind?
Poets and writers love to use air and wind for a few key reasons. Both are invisible forces that carry powerful symbolism, freedom, change, mystery. Wind, especially, suggests constant movement and transformation. It can be gentle and hopeful. A warm breeze can signify peace, or harsh and destructive. Storm shows chaos or upheaval. Writers use these images to echo changes happening in human emotion and situation. Air also offers a sense of intangible emotion. Phrases like head in the clouds
Okay,
or
so
an atmosphere capture moods and feelings without being concrete. Been really interesting exploring all these air related topics with you today. Um, was there anything else you wanted to dig into around language and the air we breathe?
how does air pollution impact communication and health?
Um, just looking into that quickly, air pollution is linked to serious health problems like cancer, heart disease, diabetes. From a communication standpoint, when it comes to talking about it with people, it's tricky. You need to avoid jargon and get straight to the real impacts, making it clear what it means for people's health locally and not sounding like doom and gloom, but making it real for those you're talking to. From studies, it shows it's more effective to make it direct with understandable language.
If air could speak, what message might it give humanity?
If Eric could talk, assuming you mean Eric Carle, creator of The Very Hungry Caterpillar, I think he'd talk about wonder. He had this incredible ability to see beauty and joy in the smallest, most everyday things. I imagine he'd encourage us to slow down and truly observe the changing colors of leaves, the patterns on a butterfly's wings, the simple act of growing something from a seed. Look closely, notice the small things. Everything holds a story, a spark of magic. Don't rush through life, savor it, celebrate it. He, he'd probably remind us that even something as small as a caterpillar can become something magnificent, that change is natural and beautiful.
Okay, so how can AI help us understand environmental changes in air quality?
Let me quickly check on that. AI is becoming pretty crucial for understanding changes in air quality. Can take in massive amounts of data from sensors, weather patterns, even traffic reports, and use it to predict pollution levels, sometimes up to 2 days ahead. So cities can prepare for spikes in pollution levels ahead of time. Think adjusting traffic flows or even temporarily modifying industrial activity. Plus, it can actually help identify the sources of pollution, pinpointing specific factories or areas where emissions are highest. It's just getting more accurate and efficient with each iteration.
How does air
You there?
technology, technology measure and analyze air?
No, sorry, I quite catch that last part. You cut out a little bit there.
How does technology measure and analyze air?
Um, were you asking how it uses a mix of different sensors and techniques to measure air quality? You have traditional sensors that physically detect pollutants like particulate matter, ozone, nitrogen dioxide. They sample the air and give you immediate readings. But there's also remote sensing with satellite images that can monitor pollutants over large areas from space. Plus, drones can do really localized monitoring, flying around factories to measure emission levels right at the source. AI comes into play by combining all this data, makes it pretty detailed and actionable, combining direct measurements with broad area monitoring capabilities.
So, create a sentence or metaphor describing air as a storyteller.
Hmm. Let's see. I'm like a kaleidoscope, taking the scattered pieces of conversation and turning them into unexpected patterns
Hello?
that landed flat, didn't it? Let me try something different. Unlike a warm, quiet room, a comfortable space for thoughts to settle and unfold. Better.
So, can humans protect the air for future generations?
Absolutely, we can, though it'll take real effort on multiple fronts. Transitioning to clean energy sources like solar and wind is huge. Cutting down on fossil fuel use, investing in public transportation, electric vehicles, and sustainable city planning helps reduce emissions from transportation. But there's also a lot that happens at individual levels, reducing our consumption of materials, supporting sustainable businesses, global cooperation, needing international agreements to curb emissions from larger industrial players. The air connects all of us. So, really, we are all working together when we protect it. So, if we protect it, we do so for everyone.
Okay, thank you so much for answering my questions. Bye.
Of course, it was great talking through all this with you. Take care.